Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the InnerFight podcast. I hope you've had an awesome week, and I hope you are ready for this week's show. I am here on my own talking all about measuring and managing stress. It is a hot topic. People know that they have, or there is this thing in the world called stress. For me, as the show description says, life is actually a series of stress responses, and I'm probably not the first person. I probably stole that from someone else. But stress is normal. Stress is good for us in some situations. Stress is not great for us in other situations. There are two different types of stress, which I'll talk about a little bit in the show. There are actually 3 or 4 different types of stress, but 2 that I've been working with people for in a number of years is conscious and subconscious stress, which if you can take one thing from today's show, that would be it. The stress that's going on in your life that you don't actually realize because it's playing out almost in your subconscious. You're almost numb to it, and therefore you don't really control it, and that's the stress that can be causing us a lot of damage. And then there's the conscious stress, stressful situations that we put ourselves in on purpose to create adaptations and increase our performance in a number of different areas of life. I think we know about them both, but are we addressing them? And that's what I address in this week's show. It's a real big topic. It's a massive factor to performance and to enjoyment of life. And it's something that I hope, after listening to today's show, you might think maybe a little bit different about, and hopefully walk away with a few things that will make you better able to manage your stress and therefore improve the quality of your life. This week's announcements for you. It is the Eid weekend. Eid Mubarak. If you are celebrating, if you're not celebrating, then celebrate anyway. And if you do not live in this part of the world, and that means absolutely nothing to you, it is the end of the holy month of Ramadan. Therefore, we have Eid celebrations going on. What does that mean? It means that there is a slightly reduced schedule here at the gym. So if you're listening to this show and it's Friday and you expect to come to class Friday afternoon, don't expect to come to class Friday afternoon. We will not be here. We'll be relaxing, observing the Eid holidays. This weekend, we also have our ladies running club. A whole bunch of them, and myself, in fact, are over in Vienna. There's a marathon on Sunday morning, which I believe you can track online. The marathon starts at 9 a.m. We have over a dozen of us, led by Steph, our ladies running coach, running in the Vienna marathon. I'm sure they will all have a great time. First marathon for some of them, first international marathon for others. Lots of good stuff to learn. Maybe we should get Steph back on the show soon and talk to her about that. The cap that I'm wearing, they didn't even put the video out. Anyway, they're all gone. Shall we get some more? Let me know. Did you buy one? Do you want one? I'm referring to them as Miami. Some people are referring to them as tropical. Others are referring to them as way out of my age category. But I'll move on. From Monday, all of our class times are back to normal. Ramadan is over. The afternoon schedule returns to normal, 4:30, 5:30, and 6:30 p.m. So if you are expected to come at 4 p.m., please do not expect to come at 4 p.m. Stay in the office, do some work. And finally, it's not an announcement. Well, it is an announcement, and it's a request. Please take a moment, hop over to whatever platform you're listening on, rate and review the podcast. Please. You listen, you take a little bit of something from the show. It's time to give a little bit of something back. Even if it's just a click, a review. Obviously, I only expect 5 stars, but please do that. And if you feel so inclined, please introduce me to a friend of yours who you think I would have a good conversation with. That's my only 2 requests. That's the announcements for this week. This is episode number 802 of the InnerFight podcast, measuring and managing stress. No matter where you are in the world, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to another episode of the show. If you're here, it means you are ready to listen to my voice for the next 30 to 40 minutes as I dig into the topic of stress, measuring it and managing it. Now, some people actually might be put off by the title because a lot of people, not you guys, because you're all good people, but a lot of people that I have worked with tell me that they're not actually that stressed. And as I was saying in the introduction, there is really 2 types of stress as I see it. And I'm going to put that at the outset, the conscious and the subconscious. You come to the gym, you understand that you're stressing your body. However, there's a lot of things that play out in life that you think you're dealing with that are not causing a negative impact. And maybe you are dealing with them to a certain extent. However, they could still be causing you stress, and there could be quite a negative effect and a bad fallout of that. My objective in today's show is to try and make you a little bit aware of what stress actually is, how it impacts you as a human being, what you can do to counteract it, and hopefully, figure out what sort of stress is positive for us. Now, some people might be saying, well, stress is a bad thing. We're always told that stress is a bad thing. Yes, a lot of stress is, but some stress is quite good stress. So I guess you could say not all stress is created equally. Anyway, let's actually look. And this show, as with a lot of shows, one of the things that I enjoy most about doing this show is not this particular show, but the InnerFight podcast as a whole, all 802 episodes of them. Thank you for anyone who's listened to a number of them. I get to research a topic every week, and that sometimes is a topic like today's topic that I'm going to speak about, or it's a guest. Most of them, all topics I enjoy researching, and pretty much 90% of guests I actually enjoy researching, unless it's a guest that's really hard to find stuff online about, and then you're going in really cold. Anyway, and always where I start is where everyone starts, I just start playing around in Google, and from Google, I try to get out of Google as fast as I can. So I'll go to a website who will quote a study, who will quote someone else. I'll go to that study, I'll read that study, and that's how I try and get out. Because Google's obviously feeding me what it wants me to have, and what it wants me to have is not always what I want to have, if that makes sense. If you're into Google, conspiracies, ChatGPT, then that might be another show. Maybe if someone is into that, then maybe I could get them on the show at some stage to talk a little bit more about it. But I believe, as I think a lot of us do, that we're getting fed stuff. So I try and get out of Google as fast as possible. But some places I go, and one of them where I want to start today is actually the World Health Organization. We were talking about this in a show with Aditya a few weeks ago. And World Health Organization website actually has a lot on it, whether you love them or you don't. It's quite an interesting place to start. And the World Health Organization defines stress as a state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. Well, if you read Steve Magnus's book saying do hard things, the hard things that he talks about doing are difficult situations. But the difficult situation, according to the World Health Organization, causes a state of worry or mental tension. So we've got some conflict going on straight away, which is quite cool. Another website I came across from the World Health Organization, I flipped on to UNICEF, and it says stress is a common feeling when we get when we feel under pressure, overwhelmed, or unable to cope. Which, think about it, most of us actually do know what stress is. I think if I could put it in a simple way, and probably a lot of scientific ways might agree with this as well, is that stress, because it's quite defined, stress is basically our body's response to pressure of some sort. Now, there are actually 3 different types of stress. One is acute stress, which is the start of this pressure. It's the start of a situation. It might be something new. When we're in a new situation or environment, we feel a certain amount of pressure. It might be a pressure to perform in a number of different ways. And to all intents and purposes, acute stress is minimal dose stress. It doesn't last for too long, and we're able to somehow navigate our way around it. But then the second part of acute stress is episodic stress. Did I pronounce that right? Yeah, I did. Episodic. Sometimes my pronunciation is terrible. Anyway, episodic stress is when acute stress is when acute stress lasts for a longer period of time, or this acute stress, these stressful situations keep on cropping up again and again and again. What we'd normally see in general acute stress is that we would get stressed from a situation maybe once, but then when we came to it again, we'd understand how to deal with it. Whilst we're still having stress and whilst we're still releasing certain hormones that I'm going to go on to speak about in a second, we are a lot more able to cope with that stress because it's not new to us anymore. We now know how to deal with it. However, sometimes when these stressful situations that we don't know how to deal with are appearing often, this is the second type of stress that we have. That leads into the third type of stress, which is basically chronic stress, which are things that are just causing us to be in a stress state ongoing. And this is kind of where we want to remove ourselves from, especially if that stress is involuntary. Voluntary stress is slightly different, but if it's involuntary, chronic stress, as the word chronic really sort of suggests, is not a state that we want to stay in for a long time. But if we look a little bit deeper, and this was a little bit of text that I found that I'm actually just going to read out. Your stress response is basically an advanced, complex alarm system that sends a series of signals to the adrenal glands. From there, your body will release various stress hormones to help prepare your body for a flight or flight response. According to the American Physiological Association, the primary stress hormone is cortisol, which increases glucose sugars. This is quite important, and that's why I wanted to read it rather than just like I normally do. Which increases glucose sugars in the bloodstream to enhance brain and muscle repair functions. This hormone also helps your body become more efficient by dampening non-essential functions like your reproductive and digestive systems. Please remember that part, that this hormone also helps your body become more efficient. So there's a positive. But how it does that is by dampening some non-essential functions in that moment, which are your reproductive and your digestive systems. Now, those of you that have read a bit around stress or know a little bit around stress will immediately be linking stress with inability to digest, digestive system issues, which are being suppressed in this moment, and therefore weight gain. I've said it, we're about 5 to 10 minutes in, and yes, stress is actually one of the biggest factors when it comes to people's weight gain, which, seeing as we're on a health and fitness show, is pretty important to talk about. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later. Adrenaline, one of the other main stress hormones, makes it easier for your muscles to use the increased levels of glucose in your bloodstream provided by the cortisol. Together, these two hormones are very helpful during stressful times. And this is what's super important. You need adrenaline and cortisol in these stressful times to basically get you into fight or flight mode and therefore almost simply protect your existence so you will not die. It's not just, not sure if we should call family stress simple stress, but simple stresses that don't threaten your life that we're talking about here. This could be a lot more serious stressful situations. So the fact that the body secretes adrenaline and cortisol is super important to maintain our life. If the body is made to secrete adrenaline and cortisol, two hormones, when we are stressed, and this is one of the questions that I want to try and answer for you guys. Why is stress actually bad? Or why are high levels of stress actually bad? There are a number of different reasons. Number one is that because we are secreting so much of these hormones, we're almost above our quota. We're not supposed to be in these stressful situations that often. Therefore, we have fallouts such as blurred thinking. We have fallouts such as low energy levels because we're using all of our energy to combat a stressful situation. And this leads to things like anxiety, it leads to depression. And one of the things as well, which is super important, is because of one of the effects of stress is actually high heart rate. We're asking our heart to pump a load more blood through the body, and therefore we have issues with heart disease. As I was saying earlier, we have issues with digestive systems because the digestive system is suppressed when we're in this state. It's very difficult to, if you think when you're in a fight or flight state, that's not the state that you, for some people it is, that's not actually a state that you're in when you're ready to digest or sit down and eat a meal. You're more in a relaxed state, in the rest and recuperate, rest and digest situation when you're sat having a meal. So we don't want to be all stressed out. Our digestive system does not work. And what that leads to basically is this is a little bit of a big call, but there is a correlation between that and obesity. If we have digestive issues, if we have heart issues, then the end of the chain is actually something we're going to lead to obesity issues as well. So that's kind of why we want to stay away from the bad stress as much as possible. Now, people would say, you said something at the top of the show about conscious and subconscious stress. How do I actually, and this is a really legit question, and that's why I've put it almost as a title. I'm going to go a few talking points off it. How do you actually know if you are stressed? And there's some really interesting ways to sort of almost, you can just do a scan of your body. The first one you'll actually need a mirror for, which is pupil dilation. So your pupils will be, it's almost like a primal instinct. Your pupils will be a lot wider open, and they're wider open so that you have a large array of peripheral vision, and you can see clearly around you to see if someone is actually coming to attack you. So if you are feeling stressed, go and check your pupil size. You probably don't know right now what your actual pupil size is at no stress. So we might have to sort of just do a few different checks. You're probably not going to be super stressed unless you've missed the alarm clock or something's gone wrong, but you're probably not going to be massively stressed in the morning, or just find a time of day where you don't feel stressed at all. Check your pupil size. Then when you get stressed, check your pupil size. Your pupils are going to be massively differently dilated. Your heart rate is going to increase because as we secrete cortisol and we secrete adrenaline, we need to get it around the body. So therefore, we're asking our heart to pump a lot more. That's why in stressful situations, you might feel what we would call, what people would normally describe as like a heart palpitation or a funny heartbeat. Your heart might have sped up. And because of this, our body's just working a lot faster. So another sign that we're stressed, and you could probably resonate with this, whether it's a meeting, an interview, or you're giving a presentation. If you're a little bit stressed out about it, there's a chance that you probably will be the only one in the room that's sweating a lot. You have big patches under your arms, whereas no one else in the room is sweating because it's still like 22 degrees. But because you're stressed about giving that presentation or having that interview, we're seeing more perspiration than we would normally see in that situation. We could also see faster breathing. So when we're feeling a certain amount of stress, anxiety, we could feel that our breathing isn't consistent. All very simple checks to have. We'd also, and this one's a little bit harder, but we might sense a little bit of mood swing. So 1 minute we might be in a really good mood, and the next minute we might not be in a good mood, and there's really not much reason for it. This one's probably best to get your colleagues or your partner to, well, maybe not your partner or maybe not your colleagues, but they would be helpful to guide you on like whether you are actually having different mood swings, because that's a massive sign of you being in a stressed state that you might not really know you're in. And this is where we get people kind of giving people a hard time for being a little bit sort of out there and a little bit split personality. It's actually they're just in a stressed state the whole time, so their moods are flipping up and down. And because of, not directly because of all of these things, but it makes sense as well, right, that if we're in this state, we've got cortisol, we've got adrenaline, that we're going to experience a lot of sleeplessness as well. We're not able to turn the brain off. We might be thinking about these things as we're trying to sleep in the evening, and that leads to, it's almost like this vicious cycle of stress, because what we end up happening is we can't sleep. Therefore, we wake up the next morning and cortisol is higher again because we're more stressed out because we can't sleep. And then we go into these stressful situations throughout the day, and the whole thing just keeps sort of feeding itself and never really getting any better until we address the problem of the stress. So sleeplessness is something that we really need to look out for. And with that, one of the natural knock-on effects is an inability to concentrate. So you might actually be experiencing a number of these different things, and they definitely could be caused by training stress. Training stress, if you train super hard in the evening at 7 o'clock and try and go to sleep at 8:30, you're not going to be able to do it. The reason is because your body's been under too much stress. So it doesn't have to be a negative, or what I would term as a more negative, stressful environment, like something's gone wrong at work or something's wrong in a relationship, or you're worried about money or something like that is causing you stress. You could be in a stressful relationship. You could be in a stressful situation. You could be in a stressful relationship as well. You could be in a stressful situation because you've trained at night and now you suddenly want to go to sleep, and then you're getting that sleeplessness, and that is leading you to a lot more frustration, and you can't really figure out why. You're like, I'm trying to take care of my health. I'm doing something really good. I'm going to the gym every evening, but since I started going to the gym every evening, I'm no longer able to get to sleep. So that's something definitely to think about. You might also feel if you are, and this is a little bit more, and we've spoken about recovery before on the podcast, but if you feel a lot of tension in your muscles, then that could be a sign of stress. And you could be feeling that either, yes, from your training, or you could just be feeling that, like people that work in an office could be feeling their muscles are sore because they've been in a tense position because of the stress that they've been facing throughout that day. So no, you don't always have to go to a gym to train your muscles to get tension, to get muscle soreness. It could actually be naturally happening from stress. Another byproduct of stress, and this is, again, and I'm going back to what we said sort of earlier, is your digestion is bad. So you could start to see some weight gain that you might not really... Your diet might not have fallen off the rails. You might not really notice that you're not sleeping, or your sleep quality is not great, but you're starting to see weight gain. That is also a sign of increased stress levels. And then finally, and this one's a little bit probably out of my area of, do I call it expertise? But panic attacks, depression, anxiety are also all related, and there's people that are far more qualified to talk about that. So I'm going to move on to the next bit and the next title that I've got here, which is why is stress, or when is stress, and how is stress actually good? Because some stress is actually quite good. And if we rewind back to maybe it's a little bit of a primal situation, but it could happen now. Sometimes when we could be attacked by an animal, or a car is coming fast towards us, which could happen if we're on a bicycle, or any situation where our life is on the line, actually to have more adrenaline and to have more cortisol in our body is going into this natural state of stress to protect us. So that's actually pretty good. And dilation of the pupils as well is actually something that's super, super positive. Sometimes when we want to do really deep work, we can get into a almost a stressful situation that it does the opposite of what we were saying earlier, where we're constantly getting brain fog. But if we have the stress of a deadline or something coming, or we've put a stress of a deadline on us, it can actually increase our brain function to get that work done, which is super nice, right? In physical fitness, we like stress, and actually we're playing with different stress responses. That's why we train at different intensities. Essentially what we're doing is we're training the body to respond and to secrete certain amounts of certain hormones, too, I've spoken about a lot, in situations, because we understand that if we train in, and this is training in different zones, some people might allude to this or might relate to this, as heart rate training, where we're training at different intensities on different days at different zones. And those of you that have a lot of exposure to training would know that we can't train at the top end, at threshold, all the time. We need some easier days. And those of you that have listened to me talk about more endurance sports, and a lot in endurance sports, we talk about 80% of our training should actually be done super easy, so we're not in a massively high stressed state, and then we would play with the 20% to make it a lot more challenging because we want to stress the body. So in training, controlled stress is very good. In life, controlled stress is very good as well. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to work at certain times in certain areas, be it work life or be it training life and therefore create different adaptations with the body and the mind. So there's actually stress used properly helps massively to advance us towards our goals and also to advance us as human beings. Now, what I spoke about earlier is some signs that people don't really realize when it comes to stress. And therefore, what we've seen a kind of a massive influx in the last probably about 15 years now is tools to manage stress. I want to start actually, like, how do we measure and manage stress is really where I want to go next. And I think let's take the tech out of it to start with. I think the first thing that we should be thinking about is they're simple things, right? We can measure our heart rate throughout the day. We can measure our waking heart rate. We can measure our blood pressure. We can measure things like the hours that we sleep. We can put a gauge on. I mean, you don't actually need a device to tell you that you slept like crap, right? Like, to be honest, last night I didn't sleep very good. My neighbors woke me up. This is one guy who loves to party, right? Anyway, I probably shouldn't talk about that on the podcast. But they woke me up at about midnight, and from midnight to 3, they were quite loud. It was on a weekday. And I knew I was up at 4, so then I've got only an hour left. So when I woke up at 4, did I feel like I'd slept a solid 8 hours? Absolutely not. I knew that I'd had some bad sleep that night. But I wake up and I'm like, okay, do I need to adjust something today? How do I actually really feel? Maybe I need to adjust my sleeping time tonight. So I've measured my stress level by my sleep, which is I'm a little bit more stressed because I'm not as well recovered, and then I can make some adjustments throughout the day. Some people don't do this. Some people claim that they don't have the autonomy to do it, that they just simply can't change a conference or some piece of work that they have to do that day, and that's probably true in a number of situations, but there are a number of things outside of those situations that we can still do. So number one measure for stress for me is definitely sleep, and I use two other, which are quite subjective, but I'll always ask people that I'm working with, okay, when you wake up, what are you excited for that day? And this can actually start the day before, and you've probably heard me speak about it on the show before. We want to wake up and we want to be excited about something. If we're waking up, and this is related to our feelings, so if we're not feeling excited, why? And normally it's because we're worried about something. Worry is stress. And then at the end of the day, we try and sort of measure fulfillment. So what actually made us happy that day? What did you really enjoy doing that day? So there's a little bit of forward reflection and backward reflection as well. Or my vocabulary today is not actually not that great. Forward reflection, you know what I mean. So what we're actually doing here is we're trying to manage our stress or measure our stress through understanding how we feel about different things. So before we go to devices, which if we look at it in the endurance world or if we look at it in the fitness world, actually all devices started out by doing, which was basically Polar, is they started out by measuring the number one thing I had there on my list, which was heart rate. A lot have evolved from that. I think I got my first heart rate monitor in the early 90s to tell me how hard I was running, to tell me how much I was stressing my body. Now we've gone a long way through, but still that's what we're measuring mainly on these devices. They're measuring our heart rate. They're measuring the number of hours we sleep. They're trying to tell us how that quality is, and they're asking us for subjective feedback based on something I said, which is how you actually feel when you wake up, how you feel when you work out, and then they're feeding that into a big system, and something like Whoop is coming up with some system, which I don't know if they've debunked it yet because it's just absolute horseshit, but they're then able to give you a recovery score. They're able to take a few different things into consideration, not really many, because how do you tell Whoop through this armband that you've just lost your job? I don't really know. I used Whoop for about 6 months, so I hate it now, but I used it to test it to make sure I had a good reason to hate it. Anyway, so what the devices, my bottom line is still the same here. These devices are actually just bringing all this data together for us. Some of it they're taking directly from us. So if we're wearing a wrist wearable or wearing a heart rate strap when we're doing a workout, at the end of the workout, my Sunto watch still asks me, like, how was that workout? Some days I have it on, some days I don't. Training Peaks does exactly the same, so we can rate how we feel about a workout. So sometimes I think when it comes to tech, we're actually going back towards more subjective and more feeling-based measurements of stress, which I think is super important, because in order to manage our stress in the best way, we need to increase our awareness, basically. So we understand 2 or 3 different things so far. We understand what stress is, we understand why it's bad, we understand how to figure out if I'm stressed. What I want to jump into as well, because I think we don't put enough emphasis on it, is signs of low stress, because I think that's really important as well, because it will enable us to create awareness about what low stress and what almost like a positive homeostasis is, so that when we're in a high stress situation, we've got something to benchmark and to compare against. So obviously most of the signs of low levels of stress are opposite to the signs of high level of stress. So your heart rate is not beating, you don't have high blood pressure, you're not sweating, you're not absolutely shitting yourself that you're going to get fired, all that kind of stuff. But if I move to more the subjective ones, you've probably got a really high drive and high motivation for life. You've got high fulfillment at the end of every day. You're super excited, even though there could have been different bits of controlled stress within that day. You don't get home and you're like, sit on the couch, order some shit food, try and watch something, don't watch it, flick your phone, and then not go to bed on time. You're super excited, you've had a great day, you're ready to eat good food, sleep on time, and the whole thing kind of repeats itself again. So you've got like this high level of excitement, which I think is super important to identify what activities cause that to happen. And a lot of this is very situational to your life and what is going on in your life. So I've just tried to give some different examples which hopefully resonate a little bit. But you've basically, when you've got a low level of stress, or you're controlling your levels of stress, your drive for life, your fulfillment and your motivation in life is probably pretty high as well. And you can do all different things, like here we can use a traffic light system, we can use a 1, 2, 3 scoring system. There's a number of different ways that I use when I'm coaching people to try and sort of create some data patterns, because we're quite good at data patterns because of the way that tech has gone. So, something that could be interesting is you wake up in the morning, and you could track this for a month. You wake up in the morning, how excited are you for today? 3, you're doing backflips out of bed. 2, you're like, yeah, I'm excited. And 1, you're like, I just want to hit snooze. You could track that over a 1-month period, have a look at your data. Also take into consideration what things you did throughout the day that have caused a stress response in your life on those days. Try and link them up, and this is the thing. There's a number of people think that a training program, I can do these runs or I can do this CrossFit program and it doesn't matter, it just needs to be done on Tuesday. Some of the not the most successful, but clients that I've had a lot of success with, or even if they've been training for a number of years, is actually just looking at how their life looks and then fitting training around that. Because a lot of people are actually, by training, like everyone wants to train on a Monday, because if they don't train on a Monday, the week is just destroyed because they haven't started off well. But lots of businesses also have a lot of meetings on a Monday. So Monday could be a high stress day in the office. Monday could also be a high stress family day, because you got to get the kids to school. It's the first day of the week. They've got a lot of activities because schools are also doing a lot on a Monday. So you could be in a massively stressed state just from work and family life on a Monday. So if you want to put additional stress on your body through training as well, we could actually be running into a lot of a disaster. So there's a little bit of a flip in a mindset to turn around and say, okay, Monday and Tuesday, we actually lower your load of training and we back end it, because towards the end of the week, your work stress gets less and your life stress gets less. So let's use the time, because you can only tolerate so much stress. So let's use the time where you're in a less stressful situation, and then we load you with training. So we're still going to get you stressed, but we're going to get the right response from the right type of stress. I wonder how many times in this show I've actually said stress. Anyway, think about it like that. It's super important how you load your stress and how you manage your life. I don't know actually how I got there. That wasn't in my show notes, but I think it's important. So I want to wrap up with what I think are 5 tips to manage stress. Number 1 is awareness of the symptoms of stress. Hopefully now, if you listen towards the start of the show, you understand what different symptoms are kicking around related to stress, and just having awareness around that. Does my heart rate go up in certain situations? Do I start to feel sweaty? Do I have sleeplessness when I have X training session coming, or when I know that it's deadlifts in the gym, or when I know that it's this, that, and the other? That is number 1. Number 2 is to practice some mindfulness, some just time where you're down. Listen, if meditation is not for you, don't do it. If you think it's all woo-woo, don't do it. If you don't like reflection, don't do it. But you need to do something that comes under this umbrella of mindfulness. If sitting out in the middle of your garden at 4 a.m. every day makes you feel better, then do that. I encourage everyone to be distraction-free for at least 10 to 15 minutes a day, which is a minuscule amount of time in a day, to be honest. Number 2, to manage your stress, practice some mindfulness. You need time where you're not drilling your mind with a number of different things, or having different people drill your mind with different things. Number 3 is eat well. This sort of goes without saying, and it's applicable to absolutely everything, but there's certain food that is going to enable your body to be in a better situation when stress comes along. So why not prepare yourself? Life will be stressful. Stress will come in various different shapes and sizes. Why not just eat paleo? I'll move on. Number 4, sleep well. Don't mess with your sleep when you are in a normal state. And what I mean by that is, if you know that work or life is going to get heavy in a few weeks, don't mess with your sleep and say, yeah, I don't really have much going on at the moment, I can afford. You can't. You need to protect your sleep the whole time. It's when your body recovers. It's when you recharge everything within you. And if it's getting destroyed on the non-stressful times, it's definitely going to get destroyed on the stressful times. So please try and manage your sleep. And managing your sleep is pre-bed routine, and also bedtime routine, and also bed routine. And I've spoken about all these different things on the podcast, how we prepare ourselves, how we prepare the room, all these different things. Make sure you sleep well. And number 5, which I think is super important, is managing your exercise in the right way. That could be exercising often. It might not be, based on what I said before. A lot of people think that more exercise will get them more results, but more exercise may just cause more stress and actually may have the reverse effect. And I have people, and I've seen people that even come and work out in the gym that have worked out 5-6 times a week, and they actually don't get results. It's only when we cut it down to 3 or 4 times a week that they get results. But be careful, you lazy people out there that are thinking that 3 or 4 times a week is what you should be doing, because you probably don't have a super stressful life, and you probably should be doing 6. But anyway, that is number 5, which is exercise often, but also manage the load. Folks, that's what I have for you on stress. What it is, how you measure it, how you manage it, and how, hopefully, if you did some of what I spoke about, or you do some of what I spoke about, you potentially could live a healthier and also happier life, which is why we do the show. Thanks a lot for listening. I will catch you next week.